the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Hello, my name is Jenn Zahrt, and welcome to Within Orb, a production of the Celestial Arts Education Library, a podcast bringing people together around the love of astrology, books. Join me as I interview people about the astrology books that changed their life and practice. You can support the podcast at withinorb.com. Welcome to another episode of Within Orb, and today I get to fly north across the border to Toronto to meet with Mo Olufemi. Mo, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me.
So great to see you here and chat with you about astrology books, and let's just jump right in. What was your first astrology book?
Oh, God. So honestly, it was one of those Scholastic Book Fair things you get when you're like 7.
Oh my
And
God!
I remember it vividly. I don't remember the title. I just remember it was like this purple and pink covered book with like yellow text, and it was about like friendship compatibility between all of the sun signs. It was very cute.
That's
And
so sweet.
yeah, and I remember being like 8 or 9 and just like thinking about, okay, what's the sun sign of like every person I know, and do I like them or not? And like cross-referencing with the book. And I found it very, very insightful. I wish I could remember it, but like that was so long ago. That was like 20 years
Yeah.
ago.
But that's amazing too, because like what better place to start learning about sun sign astrology than when you're in class with people who you might not get along with. And then you can be like, oh, I know why we don't get along now.
No,
You
for
know?
sure. So I went through one of those like edgy teenage, I love science and I'm all about this like atheist materialist bullshit. Like I went through that entire phase. That was adolescence and then like maybe early young adulthood.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until like towards the later college years where I kind of got back into it. Though I did find my birth chart for the first time when I was 16 because my mom was like, here are all your documents. You need to like manage them. I was like, okay. So it's like, oh, birth certificate. Oh, there's a time on it. And
Ooh.
then I think I was on Tumblr. So this is like in the 2010s when I'm in that awkward, like, I kind of want to do the science materialist bullshit, but like kind of into the woo-woo. And like, it's Tumblr. So I look at my birth chart for the first time and it's like, oh, no wonder why I don't identify with stereotypical Taurus things. But then the other thing that was confusing to me was because I was in the modern astrology framework. It's like, okay, Pisces rising, Neptune. And I would read about it. And then I read about Neptune and Capricorn. And I was like, this is not me at all.
Wow. Yeah.
What is that? I don't know what that means. That doesn't gel with how I am as a person. Like,
Right. Yeah. Funny enough, I just read an article by Philip Graves about the history of how astrologers decided Neptune rules Pisces.
oh,
Because there's a history to it. It didn't just pop out being discovered saying, hey, I rule Pisces.
interesting. I'd be interested in reading that because I feel like out of all of the outer planets, Neptune and I as a concept just don't gel.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if
Uh,
it's in Capricorn, no. Yeah, okay. So I'm glad that the atheist materialism was a phase because some people
oh,
get
totally.
a whole lifetime of that. And then.
You know what started breaking me out of that? It was two things. So this was late in college slash like having my first job. Everyone I knew was super into astrology. So I was like, okay, yeah, I know enough about astrology to like go deeper into it. But then I was like starting to read more and I was like, okay, modern astrology, you can predict things with it. So I was like, okay, what techniques are out there? So I think I encountered it's like that big fat book called The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need or something. And I found that it was a great start with respect to learning more about the symbolism and like some of the themes of like signs and things. But again, there was still that I'm reading about Pisces rising. I'm reading about what my chart ruler is in theory, and it's not gelling. It's not gelling at all. And then I think it was through that I was able to like somehow branch into some of Noel Tyle's books, like the one he has on solar arc progressions, and then just some other stuff like Dane Rudger articles on progressions. And I was like, okay. And it was through trying to learn more about progressions and like which form is better that I stumbled upon some of the traditional stuff. Because
Uh-oh.
I remember seeing like, I think it was Luis Ribeiro's or somebody else's like thing on primary directions. And I was like, this does not sound like what I was reading about.
Right.
And it sounds too complicated.
But it's super technical.
It's super technical. And then I think I found the astrology podcast. This would have been like late 2017, early 2018. So it's funny because Saturn had just moved into Capricorn. So it's like, okay, astrology, cool. And then I find this podcast. And I think what was weird was that Google search was mixing up progressions with perfections. So I saw like both episodes that had existed at the time. And I was like, okay, what's this traditional stuff? And that's how I started getting into traditional astrology. And then I was like, oh, Jupiter also rules Pisces. I have Jupiter and Sag with my moon. That makes a lot more sense.
There it is. There it is.
And here we are today.
Wow. That's an awesome journey into the tradition by way of modern, by way of rejection of all that, by way of this cool little friendship book that you found at the Scholastic Book Fair. Okay, so you're in a very awesome artistic city, and I'm gonna plop you out of that and maybe put you down in, I don't know, let's go to a really remote island off of Chile.
Okay.
And you can take some books with you. You've got an ephemeris because everybody on this show gets to bring the ephemeris because that's just a given, right? But
Amazing.
what three books are you putting in your bag?
Okay, so of course, I'm gonna be that annoying person and say the Blue Sahl book. It's just too good. Like, it's a great reference for everything. The other one I'm reading a lot right now is I think it's on Religions and Dynasties by Abu Mashar as compiled by another person because I've been in the process of like going back and reviewing my botched election prediction
Oh,
and I'm starting to like see like okay, it's not that the techniques that I'm using are like terrible and there's certain parts of like those predictions that were true. It's just that if you were to prioritize and rank certain things, go back to the mundane first because like another thing that I was also noticing was just looking at the charts of like people in Trump's circle is that sometimes someone else has a better activation than you. Example, Pete Hegseth.
mm,
Dude has great fucking timing right now. So like
mm-hmm.
I think the idea that he's not going to get his confirmation probably misfounded.
Mm,
Like he's got all these like 10th house, this, that, and the third. Like it's just super active right now, his chart. So it's like, oh, and like Trump needs to be the vehicle. But then I was looking at other things in Trump's timing where it's like there's some difficulty coming later, but it's like if you're not elevated, how can you fall? So it's like, okay, layering. And so having that text has been super helpful. However, the last book that I would bring, and I'm just going to go Vedic right now, any translation of the Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, the text that most people reference when they're engaging with what's called the Prashari form of Vedic astrology. I think it's like a great like elementary bare bones text that just covers everything. So
everything.
yeah, like most
Hmm.
things, like
Yeah,
most things.
yeah.
So those would be my three.
Awesome. Okay, I had no idea that you had Vedic in your kit.
That's like my side passion right now,
Okay,
Vedic astrology.
amazing. So let's go back to the Blue Sahl book, which is Sahl ibn Bishr from Ben Dykes, yes? Okay,
Yes.
so this is, I mean, I feel like with Ben Dykes' translations, we get the green book and the blue book coming forward now, with On Revolutions being the green book and one that's cited quite frequently. But this beautiful Blue Sahl book has so much in it. So, what is your favorite thing about this book? Like, why is this one coming with you?
So my favorite thing is that it has both things for, well, okay, three main branches of astrology, horary, electional, nativities. So much richness in terms of like the nuance of interpretation. My favorite sections are obviously horary and electional because those are things I don't get to do very often as an astrologer. And what I found interesting about the way that he does horary in particular is that for certain topics, you use the whole sign angles to describe different parts of something. So, for example, if you're doing something that relates to like health or illness, it's like the first house is like the person in question. I think the seventh house is the illness, 10th house is the doctor, fourth house is the cure, something like that. And you look at the condition of those things and the relationship to those things in terms of like judging how compatible the person is with the cure. Like, okay, is the cure that's available going to make them sicker or not? Things like that. And then just other versions of that, like, okay, if you want to buy or sell a house, like first house is the person who wants to buy, seventh house is the person who's selling, like the condition of the house is like not even the fourth, it's like the 10th, and then or the thing you want to buy is the 10th, and then the outcome is like the fourth house or something. Like I need to like cross-reference the relevant pages, but I found that very interesting compared to how like horary is like done and taught based on like more of the Renaissance methods.
So does he also go back to using quadrant houses, or is it only a whole sign house consideration for the horary chart?
I would need to double check because I mostly read them as reference, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is like quadrant consideration, but for the most part, it's very whole sign focused from what I've gathered.
I love that.
And I mean, even if you don't take the whole signs, if you take the actual, angles themselves, like still, you're not looking at the second house, you're looking at the condition of this angle. So I thought that was cool.
Are there any other spots of the Blue Sahl book that
Um, I like the electional parts, especially like when it comes to placing the moon. And so something that I've realized when doing my own elections is honestly keep it very bare bones. You need a good moon, making good aspects, a strong first house ruler connecting with the topic in question, whether that's through the house or like the general significator. And I've found it pretty helpful.
So would you, looking at this electional bare bonesness, would you bring the outers back in, like Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, or is it possible to ignore them?
Personally, I find it possible to ignore them.
Yeah.
However, like honestly, I would say the last like 2 years of my practice, I don't look at the outers. I don't think about them. Like the only time that I will mention them is I've had a handful of clients where it's like, okay, the outer is ingressing into your perfected house. It's touching like your sect light by hard aspect within like a degree, and it's like, okay. But other than that, I treat them very much like the fixed stars. I use them pretty sparingly.
That's cool. It sounds so liberating. This, especially now, this is the first conversation that I'm having on air in 2025, and it's like, yeah, could just ignore the outers. Just go back to
Yeah.
those good days of not knowing Uranus was floating out there in space.
No, and you know what's even crazier? So I consume a lot of Vedic astrology content a lot. It's like there's a whole sphere of astrologers who just do not. They don't think about them, they don't look at them, they don't factor them into their interpretation. So it's funny because I was actually watching one of the forecasts from the perspective of Vedic astrology for myself and my partner, right? And what they actually do when they look at transits is, I mean, they don't even care about what like Mars and, onto the interior planets and the luminaries are doing. The four planets or placements that influence your transits for the year are going to be Saturn, Jupiter, Rahu, and Ketu.
Wow.
Those are the only things you look at
Talk
because
about keeping it simple. It's like,
it's streamlined, like, and you don't have to, and it's like not only that, but both my study of Vedic astrology as well as like some of the more medieval like Persianate, Islamicate, as well as Hellenistic astrologies has taught me is that I think the way that we think about transits is like it's not that they're not doing things, they're doing things, but like when you look back at your life as the narrative it is, like you're not going to be thinking about like Venus retrograde unless it's activated in some way. So it's like, yeah, okay, great.
although it's funny you picked that example because I have a Venus retrograde story in my own life that is literally like the thing around which I would spin the whole story. So, but again, like you're saying, it was absolutely activated, pivotal. It's in also the promise of the chart because of when I was born, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's something people forget too, is like when you're born it sets up the pattern that will be something you're sensitive to as
Yeah.
things proceed. So like not every transit's going to do a thing that's very influenced by modern media needing to continuously produce new things for people to consume. But also like if it's in the promise of the chart and then the sky's matching that, okay, that's when it's Mo's time. When it's
Yeah.
the promise of this chart for Jenn and it's matching that, okay, that's Jenn's time.
No, I agree. So it's been interesting seeing like the Saturn Jupiter square play out because I have a Saturn Jupiter square in my chart.
Hey, holographic transit.
But it's like it's the not fun version because it's
Uh-oh.
like, instead of Jupiter in domicile, it's Jupiter in exile.
Yes, but in triplicity. That
That's
doesn't get
true.
enough help, like.
No, triplicity, like even looking back at like both my own life, the lives of people I know, and like thinking about clients, for sure. Like I think the fact that Jupiter has triplicity right now is very slept on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, my whole concept for that when it ingressed was just with a little help from my friends.
Listen, I love triplicity and I think it's an underrated topic.
Does Sahl have great things to say about it? Because I know Umar's triplicity work is fantastic. Bonatti's got it going on. How about Sahl?
From what I've read, not too much in his. I would say that like Dorotheus and Alan Darzagar are better sources
Hmm.
for triplicity and its
Have we
utility.
yet found Alandar Zagar's actual writings yet, or is it only filtered through?
No, I think it's only filtered through whatever translation of someone's like compilation, but I still find that has been like the more useful manifestation. And then, always have to shout out Dr. Lomi and his great Patreon. Just thinking about how to use some of those like rulers. So, for example, in some of the compatibility and romance work, looking at the triplicity ruler of the fifth house, or like the first, no, I think it's the second one actually. And then the first triplicity lord of the seventh, right? To say things about partner and like sexual compatibility. And I'm like, okay, great. I love this stuff.
Oh yeah, I go to those triplicity rulers of the houses comes into every consult I do. I can't get away with not but mentioning it because people ask you specific questions and then you can get the answer with that technique.
That's true. That's true. The one thing that I struggle with, like just looking at my own chart, is like the ones for the first and the second house. Because
Uh-oh.
I'm like, do I really want to like hear these like not great things about my money?
Oh. Well, so for those listening who aren't aware, the first, second, and third triplicity rulers of the second house cusp will indicate where money will come from in the first, second, and third parts of life. So the placement and nature of the planet that represents that part of life will be the source and quality of the money.
I'm not looking forward to the dignity change,
Then it's your time
personally.
to work that elbow grease now.
I mean, it just sucks because it's like, okay, if you're like, okay, night chart, Jupiter's the first triplicity lord for my Aries second house. It's in domicile. Great. Sure, it's retrograde, but it's in domicile. Then it's like the sun, which is in Taurus, which is like, it's not great, but it's not terrible. And it's in the third. So I'm like trying to think about that because I'm thinking that given that my Saturn return is ending, I'm shifting into that period. And I think that's coinciding with like a mental shift in terms of like, wow, I was just going hard for so long. I don't want to do that. I want to be in my like
Goddess zone.
slow, yeah, slow goddess era.
Yeah. With a little bit of teaching, a little bit of writing.
Right.
Can you get paid to be a neighbor? That's a third house topic.
You know what else I was thinking of? Because I know that I know for some Vedic astrologers they talk about like the third house being the things that are achieved by your own efforts. So a lot of like entrepreneurial, like innovative like things also get put in the third house. And I'm thinking about like certain aspects of my day job. I'm like, oh,
That might shift. Yeah. You could
Interesting.
also, though, because it is third to you, although not to me, because I would love to visit Toronto. It's one of those cities I've never been to. I've lived in Montreal. I've lived in Vancouver, BC for a week. A week. Does that count as living somewhere? I do. I like to think of it that way. Montreal was longer. Anyway, so, but I've never been to Toronto and want to go. And, but you could be a city tour guide.
It's either that or something that I have done a lot is like I've traveled a lot throughout Southern Ontario. So that's been very, very interesting. So no, that's great food for thought, actually.
I'd literally talk about this all day in my consults with people. Like,
Oh my God.
where could we squeeze money out of that planet in there?
Or podcasting.
It is the sun.
Yeah, I have to revive my podcast. It's
It's your
just
time to
like,
shine.
let's just say the first like two-thirds of Saturn in Pisces is not allowed for that.
Well, not when it's in your first. I've had that recently, and it's a little, yeah. Okay, so back to it with Sahl. So Sahl on triplicities is a little bit weak, but triplicities are really really cool.
Mhm.
Just this is it's a technical question. The academic in me needs to know. Have you read the intro that Ben wrote for this Blue Sahl book?
I feel like I did, but I read it in like 2020. So
Okay,
like it's just
okay.
not fresh right now.
All right. So there's something that I read in there that I kid you not completely changed my astrology and
Mm,
has like led to almost a crisis of like self because
okay.
in it he talks about a concept that the weighing of essential dignities was a joke. And he provides evidence for this that there was somebody in the year 900 who was kind of a person in the community who had a bit of a reputation for being a jokester, kind of, on not someone everybody picked on basically. And the
Oh.
guy's like, oh, well, neener, guess what? 5 4 3 2 1. So there. And then people took it seriously.
Well, I mean, but what's interesting is I forget the gentleman's name, but I think he's based in Iran and he has access to all like the Persianate stuff. And they've got like so it sits nicely between a lot of the Islamicate like stuff that eventually moves further west and some of the stuff that comes in from India. And oh man, I wish I could remember his name. But anyway, he was giving a talk at one point and he mentioned that they actually had a system for ranking things with numbers, but it was way more complex than the simple, oh, 5 4 3 2 1 system.
Right. Yeah.
So I can see where, yes, it's kind of a joke, but I would imagine that like people doing astrology within those regions were thinking about how to make this more quantitative in a way
Yes, exactly.
so that you could weigh things. But no, I think that opens up a great talk about dignity. And I love how sometimes on social media people come to the conclusion that dignity doesn't matter. It's like angularity and all stuff. After like doing the election predictions and just going back and looking at my notes and everything, I was like, nope, I should have weighed dignity more because that would have changed my interpretation a lot, actually.
Yeah, but I think that there are some dignities like the terms or bounds that get short shrift because they're not valued as much as something like rulership because of the sort of nature of our current social climate. And
Oh
the
yeah.
codification of those things never had like some people flipped bound and triplicity so that triplicity actually got 2 points and bounds got 3 points. But even then, it's like, how do you decide that if exaltation is all the benefits of rulership without the cost, usually, why isn't that 5 and then rulership is 4, if it's elevated? So there's all of this, like, nuance to why I would love to see the more complicated system, because that might be something I'd prefer to use versus the sort of watered down version that seems to have a very strong allegiance to the current societal makeup.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so when I was thinking about dignity and if I had to weigh them, like obviously being in domicile or exaltation, I would say depending on like what the person or planet is seeking, domicile could be better, exaltation could be better in some contexts, right?
Yeah.
And then for the other dignities, I don't even think of them as lesser because when I was thinking about how to evaluate planets that rule certain periods for zodiacal releasing, for example. So I was looking at Kamala's periods as well as Trump's, and it's like I know some people like to switch Trump's lots. I actually don't. I keep the same lots. But then when you look at it through the original framing, it makes sense. And it's like, oh, why was his I don't remember if it was his Gemini period or some other period. It might be his Leo period, actually. So yes, he's going into a Leo period that's going to be very stressful because the malefic out of sect is there. But when you look at the condition of the sun in the chart, the sun is in its own decan and it's in the 11th house. So I think looking at other like Leo periods, like on L2, maybe not L1, but L2, they're actually not his like worst periods because the sun technically is operative. It's got dignity by face. Of course, it's looking at the sect benefic, which is great. And I think it's not making hard aspects to either malefic, even though, the malefic out of sect is looking at it by sextile. So I was like, okay, maybe it's not going to be the worst thing, right?
Yeah. It's good that you don't flip the lots, because I recently attended a seminar with Demetra where she was going through the evidence about this and was like, we shouldn't be flipping them. From the Hellenistic sources, she was bringing evidence that the lots need to be the same regardless of whether the chart is a day chart or a night chart.
Okay, interesting, interesting. So I know people were flipping his lots not because of that, but because the lot of spirit is like in the whole sign eighth, and that's not good. So it's like, why not make spirit one or the other? There was some like strange justification for that, but that's interesting. I mean, I get that, but I'm also like, I don't know if I fully agree. Just because it's like, I mean, for me, it doesn't matter anyway. They're both in Virgo. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's traditions that develop and that are useful, even like the idea of weighing essential dignities in a simple, medium, or complex format. It speaks to the culture doing the work. The need to flip by day or night came out of a need in that whatever culture did.
yeah.
Imagine stepping into a room of 5,000 astrology books, turning a corner and stepping into a room of 2,000 more. The Celestial Arts Education Library is every astrologer's dream, and it can be yours. I invite you to come support CAELi before you can visit physically. Your support will mean the creation of 52 new episodes of Within Orb next year, 4 issues of the CAELi Review, our inaugural journal, and countless book talks, events, classes for our community. Visit our website, www.caeli.institute/support, to select your level of care. Please help support CAELi into the future, our future, so that we may study the future together. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy the rest of the show. Going back to On Religions and Dynasties by Abu Mashar, that is like a 600-page book.
Oh my God. I'm only like through maybe like the first 100, 200 pages of that. Very dense, very heavy stuff.
Yeah. So did you get to the part on the dawr yet?
I had to reread it and I still don't fully get it. I still don't fully get the dawr.
That was one of the most cool things that I learned this past year.
It's like, okay, I understand its utility, but like, how did you guys decide on this particular sequence of planets is where I get lost.
So, in a way, what I think is cool about it is that, in a sense, because of the precession of the equinox, we can't figure out where the zodiac actually begins. But because you can track Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, you can locate yourself in time and space with those. You can't do it with the moon and sun because the barycenter between the Earth and moon has an 18.6-year wobble that is also difficult to measure. We're at the lunar maximum now, having a lunar standstill this month, I think, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this is like, a maximum point in that cycle. The moon is going to be out of bounds a lot next year and has been this past year.
Okay.
But yeah, so the conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter, they'll shift their trigon. But because of, Persian math, they also had a 360-year cycle called the dawr that allowed the dynasties to be tracked through the dawr shifts. And so the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius wasn't just the beginning of the air mutation. It was the grand shift into the Jupiter in Libra dawr.
Yes, I remember Blaze mentioning this.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's incredible, like, because it is literally, I was just talking to Radio Free Golgotha about this. They had a speakeasy of the dead, and the topic was apocalypse. And I'm like, how do I talk about the apocalypse in astrology? And I was like, oh, well, we kind of just did one. The pandemic led up to this moment of complete cataclysm and then restructuring that we're in the middle of the restructuring now.
I mean, I feel like we're in the beginning of the restructuring. Like, I don't
Yeah,
even think
that's
we're
what I meant
done
to
yet.
say, for sure. Yeah, we're definitely just beginning that. So yeah, I'm glad that you're bringing that book because I feel like if you could utilize this moment of your sun in Taurus waking up in the third to be a thing, there's so much in this Abu Mashar text on religions and dynasties that needs to be translated for the current state of our practice. I really
You
think
know,
so.
what I was thinking about was like, I remember when people were trying to interpret, the quality of the triplicity shift. They're like, okay, air, it's like diffuse, like they're using the qualities that we know of air, like physically, which, is not bad. But when I was reading this book and they're like, yeah, okay, rise of empires in the north for, the age of air. And I'm thinking of climate change, for example,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And how, let's just say my move to Canada was very strategic. It's like, okay, they've got oil, they've got resources. The permafrost is going to melt probably. Not good for the earth, but
Good
I'm
for
thinking
Canadians.
good for Canada, good for Russia. Just thinking about like the people at the super northern latitudes,
Yeah. Yeah.
probably good for them because like it's just going to be very difficult to live on Earth, if we keep on how we're keeping on. And then I think I was also reading about how the diurnal like elements, so fire and air, are associated with the rise of like great men and like people who command centralized authority. Whereas, there's more of, I don't want to say democratic, but like it's more diffuse among the people, the power, when the shifts are happening in, or the conjunctions are happening in earth and water. And I was thinking about how people were like, okay, great era for democracy was, the conjunctions in the last period we had. And, that's true. But then when I read that, I was like, oh, okay.
But you see, this period that happened before the Jupiter in Libra dawr was the Saturn in Virgo dawr, because it goes in descending Chaldean order and then through the zodiac. So it's like you had this Virgoan period, which 360 years of, if we think back to like the 30 Years' War and the Treaty of Westphalia setting up the current global order, that was about 360 years ago, no?
Yeah, it was.
So it's like that became this idea of sovereignty, determination of national selfhood, and then a kind of impending globalization threatening a post-Westphalian order complex, right? Because a lot of the power is not necessarily seated in politics, it's seated in the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like thinking about that, and I'm just like, yeah, about democracy. Uh, are we still going to be doing that?
Yeah.
But it was interesting because I also was watching, I've been like going back and forth between self-improvement and astrology YouTube versus like, okay, what's going on politically in this moment? And they're like, yeah, there's like a whole like arm of like technocrats who like literally want to like construct the collapse of political societies so people will not want to do democracy anymore.
Hmm.
There are people who want that. And I'm like, that's like crazy.
What do they want to have in its place?
I think they basically want to bring back some kind of like neo-feudalism or something. No idea.
Wow.
You own everything. Nobody owns anything. They work for you. They're happy with their little creature comforts. But like they don't get to like pick who's like running the show because then it doesn't compete with their business interests.
Some might argue that we haven't had a choice for a long time now. Anyway.
Oh no, I would agree entirely. But like, we've had the illusion of choice for so long. What happens when you get convinced that having choice is bad, right?
Mythic fairy tales come back.
For sure, for sure. I think I was also thinking a lot about the pandemics because it's like, okay, I was reading about how it's not good for plagues and illness. And it's like, okay, great, we're in one of those eras again. And what does that mean?
Well, and the other thing about air molecules, like water molecules need to be close together, but if we go back to the physical descriptions, like air needs space. And
Hmm.
in the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in 2020, the AIDS epidemic was like, now we're going to use barrier protection when we get intimate. And then when the Jupiter Saturn conjunction happened impending to Aquarius, the pandemic was like, now you can't even stand next to each other.
Yeah. It's interesting how like we're trying to like prevent distance. And I'm thinking about like how workplaces are structured, right? And yeah, like remote work has opened up a lot, but then it's just like, oh, if we're not staring at you at an office, you're not really productive. It's like let's force these like I'm not sure how sustainable all of those things are going to be.
The
Like the forced.
panopticon lost out in the
Yeah.
pandemic. But now we have everything on a Zoom recording, so it's like, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting stuff. So I'm very curious to see what comes of this particular age. I'm very excited to see what happens during the Libra conjunction in 2040.
Right. Okay, so Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra.
Yes. BPHS.
BPHS. Just say a couple things about it. You said it had everything, but I just want another little nugget before I ask you what books beginners should get.
Yeah, so it's great because if you really want to understand a lot of the principles of Vedic astrology, it covers, obviously the planets, the signs, briefly bits about the nakshatras. You can even get some stuff on, how to calculate dashas and things like that. But there are also some other interesting things like Arudha Lagna, right? So basically it's not quite like a lot, but it's similar. Like the premise is very similar, where you look at the distance from, but instead of counting degrees, it's like whole sign. Okay, so the distance from the ascendant to like your chart ruler. And there's special rules such that, the Arudha Lagna can't fall in the first or the seventh. It has to fall in any other house. And basically you get like a whole other like hypothetical chart. So it's like how you show up in the material world, right? Because a lot of the cosmology is more like, okay, your natal chart is like your like spiritual destiny in a way, and as are the divisional charts that go with your natal chart. The Arudha Lagna is like, okay, if someone was to look at your life, like externally, the way that this is arranged describes that. So like, there's certain configurations, like for example, if you have really strong planets like Venus or like other benefics in like the second or the 11th, okay, this is someone who has a lot of money materially. I think you would look at the 12th from Arudha Lagna to say things about like marriage partner, partnership, things like that. And like the different houses from the Arudha Lagna, I think you could look at like the third because it's eighth from the eighth to say things about like death. It's interesting.
Hmm.
So there's that. But then there's this special rule where because in Vedic, according to some authors, Ketu co-owns Scorpio and Rahu co-owns Aquarius. When you're deciding like which ascendant lord to count from, you take the stronger of Ketu or Mars for Scorpio rising, or you take the stronger of Ketu and Rahu for Aquarius rising. So for me, being a sidereal Aquarius rising, it's like, okay, I have two Aruda Lagnas. Which one's more accurate? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, or you get the rectification question, which because of precession, you have to choose
Your Ayanamsha,
your
yes.
Ayanamsha properly to make sure that because if you change Ayanamshas, I also change. It's not just changing from tropical to sidereal, but on the sidereal, it's cuspy.
I hear you. Like, I would say in most Ayanamsha except Fagan Bradley, I'm still a Taurus. So, but in Fagan Bradley, for some reason, I'm an Aries that I don't see it, don't claim it, don't want it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually use what's called Chitra Paksha or True Pushya. So it roots the zodiac to the fixed star in Pushya Nakshatra. So one of my favorite astrologers used it. It's been tracking, so
There
I
you
just
go.
use it. I know most people use Lahiri. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. I think that's the most. So Lahiri, even though it's similar to Chitra Paksha, which is true Chitra, I think they differ slightly because I think one puts the star at the very end of Virgo, and the other puts it at 0 Libra. So it's like, is the star at 29 Virgo or is it at 0 Libra? And that's why they're really close.
And here
So
comes Abu Mashar, and he's like, chuck all that in the bin. We just need to look at the conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter.
yeah, no.
Ah, very good, very good. Okay, well, yeah, Arudha Lagna. I'll have to look into that. It's already making my, like when you learn something new and your mind starts to kind of do that meme where
Mhm.
you're seeing it in front of you and you're already calculating and like
Yes.
shifting and putting things there. Like that's where I'm at right now. Is that I'm like that woman looking through the glass thing with all those white little scribbles. I'm just but it's the favorite feeling that astrology gives you. So if you were going to infect other people with this beautiful plague of star knowledge, where would you point them?
So, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to like make a whole document of like my Vedic learning because unlike all the other stuff, because everybody's like learning from their lineage of astrologers, a lot of the tradition is oral. It's not necessarily written. So there are written parts, but it's like there's certain things that people get passed down to them that are not written in like a formal book. Like, for example, I encourage anybody to literally type in Sanjay Roth's name on YouTube. And there are like several different playlists. And he'll be talking about something like what was this other one? He was talking about so there's Jaimini astrology, which is like a different branch of Vedic, which those techniques are not described in BPHS. And he was talking about the Charakaras, for example. So it's kind of like the general significators of certain topics. However, it's based on the degrees in your birth chart. So the Atma Karakas, the one that describes like you, right, primarily, is the one that has the highest degree in your birth chart. The second one, the Amatya Karaka, second highest degrees, describes like career, profession, sort of the things you do.
Related to the
There's some,
midheaven? Or
kind of, a
what
little
counts
bit.
as high?
So as in like the actual number, so like within a sign. So, for example, my Atma Karaka in sidereal is Saturn because it's at 28 degrees
Of a sign.
of a
Whichever's at the
sign.
highest degree of the
Of
sign.
a sign.
Got
Yeah,
it, got it,
any
got it, got
sign.
it. So yeah,
Any sign.
got
Yeah.
it.
And then you get all the way down to the lowest one, which is the Darakarka, which describes both like partnerships and other people, but like it can also be like a wealth giving thing as well. And that would be the one that has the lowest degrees in your chart.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that. It's simple. It's simple
Yeah,
and
no,
hard at the same
it's
time.
simple and hard at the same time, but like he was talking about like all of the cosmology and like the directions and how these things relate. And then he'll drop like casual gems you just won't find in a book.
Yep. Yep. I mean, it has been a mentorship all the way. So I love that you're saying, like, hey, I know this is a podcast about books, but no books. If you want to get started, just listen.
Exactly. Go listen to people talk because I think that there's a lot of value in, because how do I put this? The written tradition is important. I think it's super important. It's great that we have all these texts, right? However, we are only experiencing maybe like 10% of everything that was ever out there because there was things that get lost. There are things that are deliberately obscured, right? And there's so much you can learn from an astrologer who's immersed in a tradition, who's been practicing, who has literally had like that knowledge just handed down to them. And that's why I think there's like lots of value in, learning from Sanjay Roth or what's one of his other students that I really like, Vishti Larson as well. Like he's dropped some gems in his own lectures too. Like it's like, for example, it's like I wouldn't have known that like K2 actually does pretty well in the water signs, just because of how it is as a entity, right?
Right, right.
I wouldn't have learned that unless I was just listening to this person talk about something specific, like what does that mean in the context of evaluating like your D9 or, the condition of your Venus and or like if you're looking for love, like how do you evaluate these things? And so that's why anytime I listen to some of these like lectures in Vedic, it's like just take down as many notes as possible because you think you're getting a lecture about one thing and you're actually getting a bunch of different gems about many things.
It's like a nested derived house explosion underneath the main topic.
Yeah, it's great. The other thing I would say is that like
Oh, divisional explosion, that's what I meant to say. Like,
divisional explosion, yeah. I think as well, like there's the learning that comes from books, and then there's the learning that comes from practicing. So for example, when I was doing an event, right, and I had to read charts in like 10 minutes, of course, like when I was doing it, like it got so popular that everybody just some people stayed in line at this whole like company party just to like sit and like have me talk about their astrology for like 10 minutes. And one thing that was common amongst the people at this event was that there are a lot of people who had like either the first house ruler in the 12th or the 12th house ruler in the first. And I was like, okay, you're clearly not like struggling, you're not incarcerated, you don't work for a hospital. Like, because I'm at a company party for like a consulting firm, financial firm. Like, that's just not relevant. So I was like, okay, immigration. I was like, yeah, is that something you're doing? Is that something you've ever done? And they're like, yeah. Like, there was some person who's like, yeah, I literally immigrated here from Ireland and this is what I do now. I'm not even like in my trained profession.
wow.
Like, I can't tell you how many people, like, it was just giving, like, okay, dealing with immigration. I'm a foreigner. I've always been a foreigner. I was a foreigner before I moved to Canada. Like, there was lots of that. And then I was like, okay, thinking about my own chart, 12th house ruler in the first, quite literally not in my home country right
There
now.
you
It's
go.
like,
Yeah.
and then other like little significations of the houses that come up as you talk to people that are not written down. You know, podcasts are not described in an ancient text. Lots of podcasters have prominent third, sometimes 11th house placements, like, so
Yeah, no, like you got to get your mind into the mix and figure out what I mean, because the people who come to you will be teaching you as much as you're helping them.
oh yes, like never sleep on the value of what sitting in a consultation could bring because there's significations of planets where like in the back of your head, but then someone is actually like living it, like
Oh
quite
yeah.
literally, and it's like, oh, that's not common, but yeah, that tracks.
It's glorious. Yeah, I had a deep time twin come to me, a client who was born 3 months before me, and it was for a locational consult. So I always look at prenatal eclipse shadows in locational consults because I like to see where people can work smart and not hard. So if you have, and we come in cohorts like batches of 6 months, every 6 months, and your synastry with the shadow will tell you a lot more about how you're going to relate to that area of the world. However, if it's on not Antarctica, you might want to know about it, or it might help you explain why you have a lot of resonance with a certain
Right.
part of the world. So this person reminded me about where mine was because I was reading it for her. But if you did the converse progression, I would, she was born before me, but I was going to become her in future time. And so I was just kind of like, I love the best life that she's living wherever she is on the planet. Like, this is like a cool sign from the universe to be like, hey, you know what? Like, it's
Wow.
going to be okay because in reverse time, she's got it go. And then she's going to come to be me. Like, literally in 3 years, her secondary progress chart will be my chart.
Will be your chart.
Yeah.
That's
And so we had
crazy.
this kind of whoop. It was really, I love it when that
No,
happens.
that's actually crazy. It's funny because I was just catching up with a friend. I actually met his sister for the first time, 'cause she's super into astrology. She was actually talking about the prenatal eclipses. And I was just like, okay, I don't know which one I'm supposed to look at. Is it the solar or is it the lunar?
Solar. It's the one that
Solar,
casts the
okay.
shadow. I mean, well, who am I to say? You could read the book about lunar eclipse shadows by what is the name of this wonderful Descent? I don't know the name of the person, but Bill Meridian has written a book on the power of eclipse shadows, and it is always the solar path that is referred to in that book. So
No, it's just crazy how many charts we have to think about, like pre-birth, that like dictate like things that are happening. So I forget who. It might have been Oscar that I think it was them or Blaze or somebody who mentioned it might have even been Dr. Alomi. It was somebody in that sphere. But we were talking about the Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions and how, look at the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction before your birth
Oh, yeah.
and look at your birth chart. I looked at mine and it's like, okay, Pisces rising.
Are you a prophet? Are you going to be the prophet?
Mars and Leo in the same decan. I was screaming. I was like, this is too good.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was born very close to one, so I see it there. And yeah, we'll see. All right, so where can people find you?
So I'm Austral Tour. So Austral, like the first part of Australia, tour. Literally everywhere on the internet. I think I'm still kind of on Twitter X, mostly on Blue Sky these days. Not super active on Instagram, and I will be reviving my Substack. So,
Yay! Awesome.
yeah.
Cool. Well, all of that's in the show notes, everyone. And thank you, Mo, for spending time with me, sharing your mindscape of astrology. And yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciated it.
Thank you for listening to Within Orb. To learn more about the Celestial Arts Education Library, or to become a member, visit our website at CAELi.institute. That's www.caeli.institute. If you enjoyed this episode, please help spread the word. Follow or subscribe to Within Orb in your podcatcher of choice, rate it 5 stars, or write us a happy review. This helps others find the show. We also want to give a big thanks to the indie band The E-Block for contributing their song Wake Up for our intro and outro music. You can find them at their website, eblockband.com. This is Jenn Zahrt, signing off for now. See you next time.